Actually, I've been, yes, I'm sorry.
Didn't forget it this time.
Recording has just started, so I'm going to say it again. The title of
Say
this
it
talk
again.
is Accent for Listeners. And I want to talk about the second part for listeners, because when we're talking about pronunciation, people, I think, first of all, think about the spoken aspect, the production. And in recent times, I've been thinking more and more about the receptive part, the listening, which I think is incredibly important. And there's something more about it as well. By taking this focus on pronunciation from the receptive perspective, I think it puts everything in a different light. It it gives you a different perspective on things, which is, I think, very interesting, as I'll try to explain during the course of this talk, because I'm going to take this listening perspective on the topic of accent. So let me just share a slide for listeners, as promised. But before I get right into this topic, let me begin with a little bit of self-introduction. This webinar is being brought to you today by Mark Hancock and Taylor Vega. There we are in the pictures. I'm Mark Hancock, and I'm a white man from Manchester, England. I'm also middle class. These are important pieces of data if you want to know something about my accent. I have a English accent, but it's not completely the RP standard accent that you tend to hear. It's got certain a little bit of north in the accent, because I'm from what's considered to be the north. Only it's actually only halfway up, but they say it's North Manchester. Although you might not notice it um, if you're not from around here. Uh, and the thing is, I've lived most of my working life in other countries, um, and what's more, as an English teacher, which means that I've developed a funny way of speaking, which you might call teacherese. I'm so busy trying to make myself understood all the time that I may speak intentionally trying to be more intelligible, just because that's the way you have to be in our job, as you know. So that's a little bit of self-introduction from me. Taylor, how about you?
So, some things in common here because I think over the years, I've also developed this very funny accent of an English teacher. So, what does an English teacher sound like? What do you sound like? So, whenever someone these days asks me that question, I always think that my way of speaking would resemble something closer to what people understand as like more North American English, more like Midwestern, but at the same time with touches of Brazilian Portuguese, touches of Spanish, touches of Danish, Hebrew, and languages that I speak. Because that's the funny thing about accents. They're not these things that we just put in these boxes and just remain the way they were supposed to be. So our accents are things that are always changing and evolving through our lives. So yeah.
And that's me and Taylor, and we have this course which you can see at that website there on the screen. I'll tell you a little bit more about it at the end. But right now, let's get onto the topic of accent for listeners. Um, well, number one, there are a wide variety of accents You know that already. For a global language like English, even more so. So from the perspective of listening, there's quite a challenge there. Listeners don't get to choose the accents they hear. And this may come as a surprise because in English language teaching, we almost teach it as if some kind of standard form of the language is the only thing that the students are ever going to get exposed to. I think that's something like wishful thinking, really. Or maybe like King Canute in this picture, who apparently told the tide to stop coming in the belief, or in somebody's belief that this was going to that nature would obey the rule of the king. It's almost like we English teachers, we say, we behave as if we can control the forces of accent, that our students are not going to be coming face to face or ear to ear with other accents apart from the standard ones. No, we don't get to choose the accents we hear. So a good listener really needs to develop an expectation of diversity. If they expect everybody to sound pretty much like the audio in their course book, they're going to be perhaps shocked and disappointed. They may say something like, well, I've studied English for 10 years, but I still can't understand it. They need to develop an expectation of diversity. So I'm not going to say that they need to understand 200 different accents. No, they need to understand the kind of ways in which accents vary, so that they're not surprised when that indeed happens. So how can teachers help with that? This is the topic of today's webinar. Well, it's a big topic, accent, and it's a little bit difficult to get into. So I'm going to go in through 3 little doorways, which hopefully will each little doorway will show us a different aspect of the topic. And the first doorway is a consonant sound. The second one is a vowel, set of vowel sounds, and the third one is stress. So three different ways into the topic. And then finally at the end, I will try to bring this together into some practical tips on how to deal with this in class. So the first way in, the first door, is shown in this little poem. The TH sounds there in pink. I will now play some sound. So in a moment, I expect you to hear some audio. If you don't, something's going wrong.
One. Weather. Whether the weather was good or whether the weather was bad. The weather was better when we were together, whatever the weather we had.
2.
Whether the weather was good or whether the weather was bad, the weather was better when we were together, whatever the weather we had.
3.
Whether the weather was good or whether the weather was bad. The weather was better when we were together, whatever the weather we had.
4.
Weather. Whether the weather was good or whether the weather was bad. The weather was better when we were together, whatever the weather we had.
Okay, so we heard 4 different speakers there, each with a different accent. And their accents were very different with regard to those pink sounds there, the TH sounds in particular. In the ELT world, we tend to think, or there's a tradition, let's say, for dealing with 3 of those, of the 4 we heard, the last three are often regarded as being error or incorrect, or something that we need to stop our students from doing. The first one, replacing the th with a d sound, whether, and the second one with a v, whether, and the last one was with a z, whether. In our concern with correctness as English language teachers, it's easy to perhaps overlook the fact that the students, when they get out into the big bad world, will hear all three of those potentially, those different ways of saying it. And their status as being correct or incorrect is entirely irrelevant now. So from the perspective of listening, it seems that this obsession with correct is a curse. Let's call it the curse of correct. It's just not relevant when we come to listening. Yeah. So that was the first doorway in, and the idea that we need to get away from obsession with correctness when it comes to listening. This is the second doorway in, and it's the vowel that you would get in the word plan, that vowel. Let's listen to this one. I'll give you a little task this time. You can decide what the accent is of each speaker.
1. Dan's plan. Dan was a man with a plan to drive in a van to Japan, crashed on a track, and had to walk back. And now he's a man with a tan.
2.
Dan's plan. Dan was a man with a plan to drive in a van to Japan, crashed on a track, and had to walk back. And now he's a man with a tan.
3.
Dan's plan. Dan was a man with a plan to drive in a van to Japan, crashed on a track, and had to walk back. And now he's a man with a tan.
So, which was the first one? What was the accent of the first one? I'll just see if I can
British.
find the chat box. Is anybody writing something there?
Yeah, British.
Here we go. Yeah, found you. Well, so the first one, number one, a UK accent. The second one, Michelle Hansen, you're saying it's South African. It could be South African, that one, yeah. And the third one, US. Okay. Okay, so various answers coming through. Holly's saying it's Atlanta, specifically the last one there. So we can get more specific, South US. Okay. So we can see that these vowels vary quite a lot from accent to accent. In fact, I would say that vowels are the area where accents vary the most. Right here, you can see that the British version was quite a big, wide open mouth, plan, like that. Whereas the one from the Southern Hemisphere, maybe from South Africa, Australia, or somewhere, was more like a, for me, what would be an like a plen. And then the one from the south of the United States sounded more like a diphthong, right? Or a triphthong even, a plan, something like that. Yes, I don't claim to be great at doing accents, actually. And so maybe I should avoid doing it in class. On the other hand, it isn't necessary for me to be accurate to give, when I'm teaching, I don't think it's necessary for me to be entirely accurate, only that I should give the students some idea of how that particular feature varies, because that's what I'm aiming to do here. I want to focus on a single feature and see how it varies across different accents. Now, let's compare the UK and the Australian or South African version. You can see that we've got these words in a kind of a, these are like a train carriages, like clap, dress, kiss. Those are 3 train carriages. Each carriage has got words containing the same vowel sound in it. And we've got 2 different accents, A and B, which at this point we can see that these 2 accents are the same. The train carriages are vertically above one another. But let's do a little bit of fast evolution here. There we go. We can see that in accent B, the whole train has shifted off to the right. And now the train carriage with dress in accent A is in the same position as the train carriage with clap in accent B, which means if A is my own accent, an English accent, dress, it means that in this accent B, that this has the same vowel sound as dress. So this would be clep, clep, ket, thanks, and men, which sounds a lot like a New Zealand accent to me. So this is one kind of vowel difference across accents, when all of your vowels start shifting relative to the vowels in another accent. And so I'm calling these vowel trains. You'll notice here that both accents still have the same number of sounds here. In both cases, there are 3 different phonemes, but they're just positioned in a different way. So when you first hear somebody with the other accent, one that's different from yours, you have to get accustomed to it. For example, if I hear somebody from New Zealand and they say clep instead of clap, to me it sounds a bit strange, and I go, what's that? And then after a little short time, my ear adjusts and I go, okay, every time they're saying that, it sounds like that. Okay, so there's the vowel trains. These train carriages that I was talking about are what John Wells calls vowel sets, or lexical sets, he calls them. Lexical sets. And here you can see there are, 3 times 8, 24 vowel lexical sets. There are actually more than there are vowels in any accent. This is really a clever thing that John Wells did here. By introducing lexical sets, instead of talking about phonemes and IPA symbols, he's found a way of talking about accent differences. Let me just explain what I mean with the example of clap and bath. Here, clap and bath. For me, those 2 lexical sets have the same vowel sound. Clap, bath, cat, staff, thanks, grass, man, dance. To me, those are all the same. So the first thing I think of is, why do we have to have 2 lexical sets here? And the answer, of course, is that it depends on your accent. In some accents, those are 2 different lexical sets, 2 different vowel sounds. So that, for example, in the south of England, in the area of London, This would be with a bath sound. Clap, short sound, and bath with a long vowel sound. So because of these lexical sets, we're able to move things around a little bit this way and to compare accents. In accent A, they have the same vowel sound. In accent B, different vowel sounds. Quite a major piece of work that John Wells did in identifying these lexical sets. Okay. Now I want to move on to the third doorway into the topic of accent, and this relates to stress. And we have a little poem. You can see the bold. What does the bold represent there? Stress. Thank you, Li Tang. Stress, she says. Yes. The thing is, stress is, how is stress produced? Well, I suppose it's you're making that syllable stronger somehow. Maybe it's louder or a little bit longer or higher pitch or change of pitch. And maybe the key is actually in the syllables which are not bolded here. How do we make a syllable not stressed? And as you know, a key thing to making a syllable unstressed is to reduce the vowel sound, possibly to a schwa. And so a lot of those unstressed syllables in that poem might contain a schwa. And so they say that in the English language, schwa is the most common vowel sound. The thing is that true? Maybe not. Maybe we're just thinking of one kind of accent when we say that. Because not everybody does that to the same extent. Thank you, Yana. It depends on the accent, doesn't it? Let's have a listen to I think it's 3 or 4 different speakers reading out this poem.
One.
Every spider, every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
2.
Every spider. Every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
3.
Every spider, every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
4.
Every spider, every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
Yes, so you can see what's immediately apparent between those different accents was a difference in rhythm. In the accents from the US and the UK, which was the first and the last, there's a big difference between the bolded and the unbolded syllables, which gives the impression that English is syllable timed, right? They say that English is syllable timed. What they mean is that the spacing between the stress timed, I'm getting mixed up, stress timed. The intervals between the stress syllables are roughly equal. In the other two accents that we heard, that's less obvious because the speakers did not necessarily reduce the vowels. Let's take, for example, the letter O in contains. The third speaker said contains with a fully pronounced O, contains. This is something which varies from accent to accent. In the south of England, it would normally be a schwa, contains, whereas up north, people often make this with a fully rounded O, contains, like that. And so we heard with the speakers there, the second and the third speaker pronounced it as a fully strong vowel, not as a weakened vowel. And the same with this little preposition here, to, working hard to make it wider. In the US and the English version that we heard, this was reduced to a schwa, but in the case of speakers 2 and 3, they were pronouncing it as a full vowel. So I see that. I see that we're getting Maria Celia. You're saying that English is stress timed, isn't it? Well, that's the thing. Yes and no. It's not black and white, this stress timing business. It's more like a continuum, right? At one extreme, stress timed, at the other extreme, syllable timed, and different accents fall at a different position along that continuum. So the speakers 2 and 3 that we just listened to there, I think those speakers were not particularly stress timed. And the reason for that is perhaps because they didn't reduce those vowels to schwa. So maybe when we tell our students that English is stress timed and that schwa is the most common sound in English, we should think again. That's only true for certain varieties of English, not for all. Then there's the question of, is it important to teach vowel reduction? Maybe, maybe not. But we certainly need to take into account that you're not always going to hear it when you're listening to people. Michelle wanted to hear those again. I don't know if anybody else wanted to hear them again. Let's just have a quick listen now I've spoken about them.
1. Every spider. Every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
2.
Every spider. Every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
3.
Every spider. Every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
4. Every spider. Every web contains a spider, working hard to make it wider. Every spider wants a fly and waits for one to wander by.
Accent number 2, if you remember that man, I think he was, I don't know, would anybody like to identify the accents 2 and 3? Is that possible? Yeah, I think maybe from India. The second speaker, the man, may be from India. And the third one, maybe Jamaica, or it could be from Nigeria. I'm not quite sure, but certainly Are they native speakers of English? That's an interesting question. Are they native speakers of English? Well, let's just have a look at this famous categorization from Braj Kachru. He says that you can divide English into these concentric circles, right? The inner circle with the British Isles, Australia, USA, etc. Outer circle, India, Nigeria, Philippines, etc. Expanding circle, China, Brazil, Indonesia, Egypt. If you say English is stress timed and schwa is the most common sound, you're probably thinking only of the inner circle. Is there any reason why that should be given a privileged position in the way that you talk about accents? I don't know. But we are privileging the inner circle when we talk about those things. As regards native speakerness, it gets a little bit unclear. When you're in the outer circle, it's not quite so obvious what native speaker means anymore. Maybe it's a term that we can do without. So here's the situation as more of a map. We've got world Englishes. We've got the British Isles there, and then North America. We've got the Southern Hemisphere Englishes down at the bottom there, and we've got what I'm calling tropical Englishes here, which include Nigeria and India. And then in the rest of the space, we've got international Englishes. When people talk about native speakers, they probably mean from either British Isles, North America, or Southern Hemisphere Englishes traditionally. Tropical Englishes, who knows, but there's probably more speakers of English in this area than there are in the others put together. So it's quite an important group. Oops. Yeah. So yes, this business of accent, then I think we need to be aware that there's not only two accents. It's not only British or American, as we tend to do in ELT. There's a bigger world out there, and as listeners, people are going to hear lots and lots of different accents. So in the last part of the talk, I want to talk about how we deal with accents in class, in teaching, right? So there are two options, horizontal or vertical. The vertical option is to do one accent at a time. So you might do English accents, American accents, French accent, Scottish accent, Indian accent, etc. And it's going to take you quite a long time to get through the syllabus of all of the accents in the world that way. So you could maybe reduce the task by just choosing the ones which are most relevant to the students you have. That's one way of doing it. That's the vertical approach. There's a slight danger with this vertical approach of making it like a zoo, really, where you're like visiting these different accents one by one, like exhibits in a zoo. I kind of prefer the horizontal option, which is you're looking at specific features across different accents, and it doesn't necessarily matter what the accent is. Take, for example, R dropping. That's pronouncing the letter R in words like start. And you could compare that feature across a range of accents. Or the TH sounds, do you pronounce it as weather or wedder or weather or whether, these different possibilities. So you can make a little syllabus of individual features and just compare those across a range of accents. And instead of focusing on the accent, focus on the feature. Yes, the idea is, Holly's saying horizontal might allow for better listening training. Yeah, because the idea of this, I'm talking about listening, don't forget. So the idea is that we want learners to be flexible with regard to these things. So we want them to be ready for the fact that they won't hear the R in some accents, and they will in some others. And some accents, the R might be really strong, and some of them it might be quite weak. We need our learners to not be surprised by that. So I'm going to suggest then that we have a little syllabus of features, and here's an example syllabus, right? Top 10 accent issues. This is a little syllabus which is not going to cover everything, but it's just going to be a useful starting position, I think. You have to start somewhere. The words there written in capital letters, those refer to the word sets that I mentioned earlier on from John Wells, right? Which were back a few slides right there. Those word sets, we normally write those in capital letters. That's why I've put them in capital letters here. So lot refers to a whole set of vowels, words that contain that same vowel sound. Okay, if that's the syllabus, what does the lesson look like? I'm going to suggest that we use something which I'm calling shibboleth stories, and we've seen a couple already in this presentation. The word shibboleth, a shibboleth is a kind of a pronunciation test which instantly shows whether you're in one group or another. For example, in England, the way you say the words in the Bath set tells if you're from the north or the south. So Bath is a shibboleth in England. So that syllabus that I just showed on the previous slide, that's a syllabus of shibboleths in effect. A shibboleth story is a short text densely packed with shibboleths. For example, the one about weather that we saw earlier on. The the pronunciation of the TH right there is a shibboleth, because we can identify, for example, the French speaker because they say weather. Or the that child from London that we heard, weather. That kind of it's a kind of a shibboleth sound. You don't have to use a shibboleth story, but what you need, I think, to draw attention to help students notice this variation, it's good to have a text which has a lot of examples of the feature that you want to focus on. And then, if you can get speakers with lots and lots of different accents, all reading out the same text, then you can compare like with like. The trouble is, it's difficult to get so many different speakers to read out your texts for you, which was something that prevented me from writing this book sooner than I did. But it turns out that you can use text-to-speech software, tools like 11 Labs, which I used for the weather was good poem. And I asked it to read out that poem, and I selected some different accents which you heard there. Whether they're fully authentic or not is a question that you may wonder about. But actually, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the specific feature that I wanted to focus on here is clear. The difference that I mean to say. So the TH, the pronunciation of the TH in that poem, was it very, very clear to the listener that how it varied from one to another? That's what matters, not whether that really is a proper French accent or not, but whether or not it gives a clear example of how that feature differs one accent to another. So that's how I'm proposing that one could deal with accent variation in English language teaching. And with that, I've come towards the end of things here. I have a final thought from Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen was my late wife's favorite poet, songwriter. And one of her favorite lines from Leonard Cohen was, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." The first line there about the crack, it sounds pretty alarming, right? There's a crack in everything, something we ought to be worried about. And then the last line there, that's how the light gets in, completely turns it over. It's actually not such a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing. And I've been talking about listening, and I've said that in listening, it's no good to restrict ourselves only to the so-called standard, teaching standard accents, like, for example, RP or General American or Network English or whatever you want to call it, because that's not what they're going to hear. They're going to hear a range of different accents. I've been saying that when it comes to receptive pronunciation, we need to move beyond standard. But this is the crack where the light gets in, because having reached that insight from the perspective of listening, we might then ask, but surely the same might be said about speaking or productive pronunciation. If we need to be less prescriptive about accent for listening, maybe the same is true for speaking, which is a final thought I just wanted to leave you with. I will have some time for questions in a moment. In the chat box, I'm just going to paste some links that might be of interest to you there. You can get information about the book and the slides. You can download the slides. Also, some information about the course which Taylor and I run here, this Pron for Teachers course. It begins next week, by the way, at this very same time. So if you want to join us, please do. It's a 7-week long course. Sunday afternoons is the live session, and then there's the support material on the Moodle as well. And with that, I will stop the share and take any questions anybody's got. Has anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as an African coming from Cameroon, even within us Africans, we do not agree that we have the same accent. Someone from Ghana would say he speaks differently from someone from Nigeria, and maybe someone from Kenya would say the same. So how do we go about it? Because the way you present it, it looks as if apart from South Africa, all Africans do have the same accents. So, but there is always this argument about the differences and which of the accents tends to be more of standard accent among the
Okay.
accent different in Africa.
Yeah, Dieudonné, thank you for that. And I think the point you're making would be a serious problem if we are going to do take the vertical approach. If we're going to do accent by accent across all of the accents in the world, then you would have the problem of deciding which accents to focus on. For example, in Africa, are we going to focus on a Cameroon accent, and which Cameroon accent? That would be a problem. But if we're taking the horizontal approach, where we're looking at a single feature across all accents, it no longer matters which specific accent we're talking about. What we're looking at is this feature. Does this feature vary from one accent to another? And in that case, it doesn't come into question which accent is which. Nobody is claiming that what we're learning here is a pan-African accent. That's not the claim at all. Do you see what I mean, Dieudonné?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank
nice to see you again, by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Let me see. Well, okay, I'm just looking in the chat box to see if I can find some more questions. I noticed that Fernanda brings up the question of intelligibility. Would you only correct features that impair intelligibility? I was actually talking about listening in this session, so it wouldn't be a question of correcting anything in that regard. However, intelligibility, I think it's generally people seem to agree, or it's maybe the mainstream view that intelligibility is the thing that we correct, or we focus on intelligibility when we're teaching pronunciation. Although I do recognize that even teachers who believe in intelligibility find themselves correcting things which are not necessarily a problem for intelligibility. It might just be their own particular. For me, it's difficult to understand. You know, people tend to be very egocentric in these questions. That's why a bit of research comes in handy, like Jennifer Jenkins with her 2000. Her book she wrote in 2000 or published in 2000. She started to look at rather than just have the traditional native speaker judging everybody else, why don't we just look at what actually causes difficulty in intelligibility? I think that perspective has gained traction, but it's still working through. It's not complete, this transformation yet. Okay, yeah, that's all right. Fernanda, any more questions?
We have a question. I missed who asked it, but how do we convince students not to want to copy our accents?
Well, okay. I don't mind if students want to copy my accent too much. You know, the strange things that people get motivated by. If they're that determined. The thing is, I don't like the question that you get from students Like, what is the correct pronunciation? Teacher, what is the correct pronunciation of this? And then maybe point to a word in the book. What is the correct, or how do you say this? How do you pronounce this word? I don't like this question very much because it gets mixed up with the pronouns here. How do you, well, just me, I mean, only me, this person. I don't think they mean that, do they? They mean what is the correct way of it. They think there is a kind of single correct version that's in the clouds above us all. And I think it's important when you're teaching to build into your discourse the assumption of variety. So if my students say, what's the correct pronunciation of this? And perhaps Li Tang can confirm this, she's been in my class. I would say, well, I say it this way, but how do you say it? Or I might ask another student, how do you say it? And if the other student says it in a perfectly intelligible way, then I would go, well, you can say it like that, rather than insist on there being a single model and maybe you're it. Just try to make it normal, make it feel normal that my accent is only one possibility and that maybe the accent that the student has is perfectly fine for this particular question that they're asking about. If your student says, how do you pronounce this? You could say to them, well, how do you pronounce it? And if they say something which is perfectly okay, then you say, yes, that's how you pronounce it. Any more comments and questions? Well, I mean, I see that Claire is saying that the sad reality in China and Thailand, for example, is that teachers are bound by books that don't show accent variety. Well, I think that's probably true for all of us, actually. There are some more accents appearing in mainstream course books. But that's a relatively recent development, and it's quite limited. It's very, very curated. I know, I've been a course book writer, and I know what happens when you ask your editor to provide a different accent, please. They get the least offensive accent they can possibly find and go, okay, we've ticked that box. So yeah, this question of the sad reality that the teachers are forced to use books that don't have much accent variety. Well, what's left for the teacher to do in that situation? And I guess the answer is sabotage. Yeah, you just if the course book is presenting a standard version all the time, just display skepticism in the way that you deal with the course book. You go, well, on the tape, they're saying it this way, but I say it this way, and that's fine as well. Some people say it like that. I'm not exactly using the words you might use in class. I might try to simplify a little bit for my students. But the point is, if your only power is within that classroom, you can use that power to sabotage the point of view that there is a single correct version of English. You see what I mean? Yes, any more comments and questions here?
Mark, there's someone with their hand up. They've had the hand up for a while.
That's Karina. Karina.
No, it's I'm just saying that there's someone with hands up. I believe it's
Ah,
Maciej, right? Who wants to ask a
no, it was you
question.
who had your hand up. I could see your hand up. Anyway, Maciej, is that true? Are you where's Maciej gone?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much for a very informative talk. This is actually my second time attending one of your webinars. And yes, my question is basically similar to what some other people have asked in the meantime. That there's always so much variety regarding accents. And for example, Scottish, you've got Scottish in your table. And I used to think, based on stereotypes, that the Scottish people should have a trilled r, or at least a tap r. And then I went to Scotland for the first time last year, and it turned out they actually, especially younger people, tend to have this kind of R, which sounds Irish to me, and it's or American to a certain extent, but it's not sort of flatter a bit like the English R, but they don't really have the tap or the trill. And it's likewise when you've got French, for example. Like, not every French person is going to have a R instead of an R, or not every French person is going to say "sells" instead of the two dental fricative sounds. So, what I noticed in certain textbooks is that sometimes a person who is supposed to have a foreign accent only has a very slight foreign accent. So it's like there's no in between. There's a huge variety, but for example, English pronunciation use advanced, there are some speakers who have only very slight accents, including a Polish speaker apparently has such a slight accent I didn't recognize it as a Polish accent. And sometimes you've got recordings of people speaking with a very strong foreign accent. And is there any way to find the middle ground, is my question? Or do we have to go for
Yeah,
either something that's stereotypical or something that's very, very slight? Thank
I
you.
think I think your query. Thank you for that. I think your query specially affects a vertical approach, if I can call it that. You remember the vertical approach? If we're doing accents one by one, Scottish accent, this.
Yes.
English accent, that. If your approach is in this accent by accent manner, then you have a problem, because then you're going to come across immediately you're going to come across the problem you just said, which was people have lots of different accents in Scotland. It's true they do. And well, look, if you want to hear a Brazilian accent, you're going to hear so many different accents. Taylor right here is you heard Taylor at the beginning, right? Is that a Brazilian accent? Well, Taylor would say so. But somebody else might say, well, that was an American accent. I don't know. That's a problem if you're going to do all of the accents one by one in the vertical way. Whereas if you're doing the horizontal way, feature by feature, that's not a concern.
Yes.
Because your only concern then, if you're doing it this way, is that the examples you find should demonstrate to the listener, the student, clearly that particular feature. And it doesn't matter where their accent is from. If you want to hear a trilled R, you can find it wherever you find it and put it in your audio. It doesn't matter where it's from in that case. Plenty of people trill their R's for different reasons. Like, for example, in the theatre, it's commonly done to roll the R. You could find some very theatrical English if you want to hear an example of that. It doesn't have to be Scottish or Spanish, whatever.
Yes. One person that I remember whose English would use as a trilled R, John Humphreys. Just in case anyone's heard him, I always remember he pronounced a very clear, it's not just a tab, but like a R sound, despite being English. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maciej. Any more comments and questions? Dieudonné says, do you mind sharing the slides or recording? Yes, I don't. That is, I don't mind. First off, I put in the chat box there the downloadable slides there, the second one. The slides are available there. As regards the recording, we are recording this. I hope we can make it available to you fairly quickly, one way or another. And if you don't mind, we could maybe email you after with a link to where it is. It may be on my YouTube or Taylor's, one way or another.
We'll make it available for sure.
Yeah, so we'll email you with this link or with information about where you can find this recording. Okay, well, I'm getting certain vibe from the chat, a certain finishing of the webinar vibe, with all of these words which signal to me that everyone needs to get away quick. So, and it's 6 o'clock, and we've had an hour. I guess that's a typical length for a webinar, isn't it? It's a typical length, and anybody in Vietnam needs to get to bed right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go to bed. Go to bed. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. Thank you for the gift of your attention.
Yeah.
Para allá, pues si no te molesta.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. You're going to hear from us with the recording and everything. Make sure you get the book. Make sure you join our course if you feel it makes sense to you right now. And we hopefully are going to see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and share the information about the course in our